This is everything that's wrong with youth sports. All the people watching, paying too much attention, caring too much, recording it for history, and making more of it than it ought to be. So many kids get so sick of it, they're quitting, they hate it. Forget about kid mental health. Parents are suffering. Their mental health is suffering because they're spending more time than any prior generation with their kids. You're not going to be a pro athlete. You're not going to the Olympics, and that's fine. The adults have a plan and the kids just kind of along for the ride. And so the more we can turn it back to the kids and have it be their path, their decision, the better.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Hi, Linda. It's so nice to get to talk to you today. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we get started, I want to set the scene for the listeners. Linda, if you were sitting in the stands today watching a 10-year-old soccer game, what's the one moment where you'd say, this is exactly what's wrong with youth sports today?
Okay. It would start with looking at the sidelines, seeing how many people are there watching on the sidelines. Are our entire families watching and screaming at the kids who are playing? Are the kids decked out head to toe in the newest gear, which 10-year-olds don't need? Is the ref having to call off the fans because they're screaming at him to get the call right? Is there someone, well, I suppose there'd be no, because local news no longer exists, but if people are filming it from the sideline so they can upload their child, scoring the goal, so they can then upload it later to their social media or share it with the coach. That would be the scenario in which I'd say this is everything that's wrong with youth sports. All the people watching, paying too much attention, caring too much, recording it for history, and making more of it than it ought to be.
Okay, now let's go back to the beginning. What was your own relationship to sports growing up? Was there a coach or moment that really shaped you?
I played a lot of sports growing up, well, mostly softball and tennis and running sort of periodically. And I wouldn't say there was a single coach who shaped me, but I did have an excellent softball coach in high school she was a bit of a role model in that I knew how much she cared and she knew the game so well and she had very high standards. She was fair. For some reason, which I explain in my book, it wasn't able to translate into great success. And I'm not sure why, we just didn't click. But she really was kind of a model for how to be a dedicated coach. She was very, very dedicated. She was also discriminate with her, I don't want to say criticism exactly, but she didn't yell at everybody. Like, she knew not to yell at me because that would have been crushing. It wouldn't have helped. She kind of understood people well enough to know how to get the most out of us. But she was a role model.
What made you decide to write Take Back the Game? Was there a particular moment as a mom or coach when you realized something had gone off track?
Well, it was both in what I observed as a coach, where I could see that what I consider the purpose of youth sports, which I would say goes through high school. I think high school teenagers are youth. That it was the whole purpose of being on a team seemed to have eroded and become just about getting into college. What can this sport do for my child to get into college or a better college? And I thought that was distressing and also a very unwelcome shift. And at the same time, I observed in myself, which I also write about in the book, my kind of disproportionate concern about how my child did in a recreation basketball game. Like, I didn't, it, like, I felt so proud and so like, kind of, I'm doing something right here. Like my little 9-year-old can shoot a basket. It's embarrassing. Now it's embarrassing, and I felt even at the time that this is weird. Why do I care so much? Like my own parents, they were all for us playing and were happy when we did well. But the idea that this would somehow give them like a boost to their ego or status, not in a million years. So I was sort of aware of both internal forces and external realities that got me interested in pursuing it as a journalist, pursuing the subject. And then it all kind of led to a book.
So for sports and splitting it for youth, I consider youth sports to be younger. You're definitely more of the expert on this. But when I was originally like the idea and the thought of it, youth sports, I was thinking like, and I don't know the cutoff, but I was thinking like high school would be different than youth in my eyes, because you definitely see people in youth sports. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm the biggest. I'll say it. I'm a hypocrite because like my my 4-year-old son's really into sports, and I'm like, I'm at everything. I'm recording it, sending the videos to my parents and family. Like, I just think it's awesome. But I'll say like, I think in my eyes, once you get to high school, you're still obviously not an adult, but now like it actually means something for somebody like, in my family, 3 of my siblings got into better colleges because of sports, where if they didn't play those sports, they academically wouldn't have gotten into the schools they were trying to go to. So now at that point where it's starting to impact like real life, long-term decisions, now I do think like, I don't want to say it doesn't warrant the intensity of like what people picture, like the stereotypical, like that's obviously over the top,
Mm-hmm.
but I like I personally like, and myself playing, in high school and all that. Love the competition side of it, but I don't think it's as crazy. Use like me recording my 4-year-old is insane. But if he was, 16, 17, 18, like trying to get into a better college, trying to use the leverage of sports, I don't know. I don't see this.
Well, I think it's when the tail is wagging the dog. When it's one thing if your children and your siblings had like an organic, intrinsic love of the sport and they want to continue pursuing that because they're really talented and they love it. And oh, and look, it's going to help me get into a better college. I think that makes total sense. And I would never begrudge anyone for doing that. And that's certainly the way it was when I was growing up. I didn't want to pursue it in college, um, even though I did. But it's when, okay, it's kind of like gaming sports, using sports as a way to get into a better college. That's what I object to. And
Yeah.
what I've also seen, and I don't really have data on this, so it's more of because there isn't any, but I've seen and heard of many, particularly girls and parents talking about their daughters playing a lot of sports, full year-round play throughout high school and before, and then saying, and she'll get into a better college, and then if she doesn't like it, she'll quit. Like, so a lot of girls don't last very long, in particular in college. And there's no data because the NCAA doesn't track this, but very few young women make it through their 4 years because it was a means to an end. And that's what I find objectionable or sad.
Mm-hmm.
But there should always be a path for the top athletes, and
Yeah.
whether that's, the Olympic sports in college. And I'm all for that. And everyone should have that. It's when like the masses are like, oh, here's an angle I can use. And we
Right.
saw that with Varsity Blues that, oh, we're going to game this to our advantage. And we don't really care about the sport or, whether she even plays or not. We're just going to use it to get in. That's where I think there's a problem.
Do you think it'd be comparable though to somebody using like whether it's like an instrument or maybe it's like an SAT tutor? Like, wouldn't that kind of be the same thing? Like trying to game the system to get into a better school?
Okay, well, the difference with, say, instruments or drama or singing or any kind of extra talent is that those individuals aren't afforded a sort of institutional advantage the way athletes are. So that, like, I think personally, I think if you did away with the admissions advantages, and I don't know about scholarships, just if you did away with admissions advantages and treated sports the way you do choral or musical or drama, a special skill in that, like, that's great. You should get it should be a part of your application. Like, yeah, good for you. You're a singer. You play the violin. You play sports. We'll give you an edge. But the fact that it's only in sports is there is this institutional advantage where you're held a lower standard. You get a streamlined admissions process. Depending on the level, there's you're eligible for $4 billion in scholarship money. So that's where I have a problem with it, that it's disproportionate.
But isn't it, and again, you're way more versed in this than me, but isn't it kind of the same thing as like, just say, I'll use our family. Say that my brother and sister both get tutors for their kids. All of our kids are, 6 and under, but fast forward, they're all getting ready to go to college and they're using SAT prep or ACT prep tutors and I'm not. Like, wouldn't that kind of be a similar thing? Because they're gaming the system, right? If you use those tutors, you're going to get a better score than if you didn't. So I guess my thing is like, if you're in high school, if you're using the sport to help you long term, like it's funny because we're on opposite ends of the spectrum of this. Because I say to people like, use sports or they'll use you. And like, if you can use the sport to get you into a better college or a better fit college, like we had Malcolm Gladwell on who told us to call you. He said, don't get into the best academic school, get into the best fit for you. So I'll say that if you can use sports to leverage it, isn't that, similar to using tutors?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it that way. I mean, it's a good question. And I was going to say, well, are you getting tutored in 4th grade? But actually, kids are getting tutored for test prep, in elementary school, which is crazy. I think it's just I think both are distortions of what the purpose of sports is, in my view. And also, you could argue for the purpose of academics, which is not to get an A or to get an 800, it's to learn. Yeah. And I think that's been lost in this quest to, get into a top college at all costs, no matter what price you pay.
Yeah. I know I'm probably skipping way ahead, but it's almost like, it's like the Cold War now in parenting. Yeah. It's like I just listened to, there's an NFL player on a podcast and he was talking and he said he heard like his kids play sports and he heard that Johnny down the street, that little Johnny's taking a basketball coach comes 3 times a week and he knows his son is going to compete with Johnny down the street for the spot on the basketball team. So he's like, well, we need to, how many times should we work with him? Well, how about 4 times?
It's an arms race, then it becomes an arms race and it's a race to the bottom in many ways. And I know that parents feel that way. I know that they're like, well, if I don't do it, if I don't put my 18-month-old in soccer camp, she's going to be behind all the other 18 months old when they get, and that's just so pernicious. And, where does it end? I guess it's all about competition at that point. We're just competing with each other to, or a game of musical chairs where somebody gets left out after every round, somebody gets left out. And I think it distorts sports also for the kids, because then it is not about learning how to play and compete and have relationships with teammates. It's about, what can this do for me? Me personally, that's the other kind of destructive aspect, is that it becomes all about the individual, and team sports are used to be about the team, or they should be about the collective and what are we doing as a group together. And when it's all about, well, I don't want my 18-month-old to fall behind, and to take that up through high school and into college, then you're just, what are we even doing this for?
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I just don't know how do you get the first parent to not
stand down.
Yeah. Cause it's crazy, but it's true, because like, I know it's crazy, but I'm sitting there going, well, I don't want, almost everyone wants their kids to be in like, has as many options as they can. Right. And so like, if little Johnny's doing basketball lessons. You're like, well, if they want to play basketball, that'd be great. But I don't know how it is crazy, but I don't know how it ends.
Well, okay, but I would argue, Troy, that it's not in the best interest of little Johnny to be playing basketball at 18 months and getting coaching and all the extra teams and leagues with the idea that this is going to get him into a better college, because that assumes that there are drawbacks to that approach. And we know that specializing in a single sport at a young age is not conducive to their overall athletic development or their like mental well-being, because so many kids get so sick of it. They're quitting. They hate it. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Abby Wambach, who you guys, I'm sure, of course, know. Abby Wambach, the great soccer player. And we asked her about sports today. She has a couple of daughters versus when she was an athlete going through the system. And she said that if she were going through the way it is, the system today, she would have quit. There's no way she would have kept playing soccer. This like relentless day after day, month after month, year after year immersion in one sport. She said, I would have been so bored. I had basketball to break it up. When I played basketball, I learned how to jump, which taught me how to do headers in soccer. And I never would have finished it. So that's the drawback. That's what I think parents have to recognize, that you're not actually putting your child at a disadvantage by stopping them from doing this nonsense when they're little. You're actually helping them if you give them opportunities to play as they see fit, to run around outside, to lead their own play, not have adults hovering and instituting rules and keeping score, that's better for the child's overall development and athletic development. So if you want to have the best athlete, you want your child to be playing in college and maybe the pros, the better approach for them, leaving out everybody else, is to take it slow and let them kind of drive the bus. Hard to do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do, and I think it's also maybe sport dependent. Like a sport, like a very specialized sport, like I'll just say golf.
Yes.
If you try to pick that up late, like I can't swing a golf club.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's true. It is somewhat sport dependent. I mean, there's, according to Neeru Jayanthi, who's like the big expert on sport injuries development. He's the head of sports medicine research at Emory, and I'm getting his title wrong, but he's the big shot. He says that you need to specialize early in those sports in which you reach your peak before puberty, or what used to be considered the peak. So like gymnastics, for example, you used to have these like prepubescent girls doing all this crazy stuff on the balance beam. And now Simone Biles has shifted that somewhat, but if you're going to peak at 13 or 14, you can't start at 10. You got to start at 3 or 4. And other sports, golf is another one where I don't play golf. I don't know golf, but apparently you can't, you got to start young in order to get those strokes down. So, but it's not your mainstream sports so much. It's not soccer, basketball, baseball, running, lacrosse. There's most sports, it's fine to wait and let your body to grow into it naturally.
And I think too, like in your book, you were talking to, it's early on in your book, I can't remember his name. You're talking to a professional basketball player.
Yes, Danny O'Sullivan.
And he was saying how he started late. And I was kind of, when I was reading that, I was kind of like, I was already arguing with you when I was reading the book. They're not arguing. That sounds combative.
No, I'm glad. I want to hear it.
Yeah. Cause I was thinking about so my dad's a first round NFL draft pick, right? So how easy is it for him to say, and it's true, if no one ever showed him a sport till he was a junior in high school, he would have dominated whatever sport that they told him about. Like the sports that he got kind of not pushed into, the sort that he chose at that time because of coaching and whatever, was wrestling and football. And both of them, he was like the best in the state. So of course it's so easy for him to say, or like an NBA player to say like, oh, I did all this other stuff and look, it worked out for me. It's like, of course there's some people that are just so, in a good way, freakish, like so off the charts.
Yes.
That it doesn't matter. But I was thinking for people and I don't know any of the I have no metrics to back it up. But even sports that are more mainstream, like, whatever. Like if you said,
Say soccer.
yeah, soccer, I think though is one. I think soccer and basketball will be the furthest over. Like if you're just like a great athlete, you're just going to be great at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking like maybe like in football as an example, there's like people who are like Olympic. There's a wrestler. His name is Gable Stevenson. He was an multiple Olympic champion, and he tried to join the NFL, and he couldn't tackle because he didn't have like that muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just, or like, take hockey. Like if my dad tried to put on skates at 17, he's not going to be able to play hockey. If they did anything on land, he would have been okay.
Well, maybe if he'd put on skates at 12 and learned how to skate,
Yeah, sure.
then he
Yeah.
could play in high school and dominate. I mean, it's true that you are going to have some, out of sight athletes who are just going to dominate. Abby Wambach is probably another one who's just
Sure.
going
Yeah,
to,
it's a good example.
they're going to crush it because they're just that good and that much better. And, I think, but if you look at even Division I athletes across, not the majority of Division I athletes now played multiple sports. And they're not all Abby Wambach or Tim Green. They're ordinary people who are very good, like very, very good, but they're not going to play professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them played multiple sports. So the system is pressing you parents to get your kids into one sport at younger and younger ages because, they're, in my view, they're preying on your, anxiety about how are my kids going to do, and I don't want them to fall behind, and what do I know? Everybody else is doing it. That's a big part of it, I think. Whereas if you were left to your own devices and you just let them come to the sport as naturally and kind of through their own interests, they see kids playing. If they were more like free play, it would be better off for them. But I think there's a lot of pressure on parents. I appreciate that, how much pressure they feel to not only do sports, get them into all these sports at a young age, but what about Mandarin lessons and Kumon and all these other things so they can be ready for college.
I started Kumon this week, so you and I we're gonna have to talk offline.
We're gonna come to fisticuffs here.
Yeah. It's yeah. Dad, you jump back in. We need a break. We need an intermission.
We're gonna kill each other here.
Yeah. That's so funny.
I'm not gonna get you. Change your mind.
I think that you're right, but I don't. I think the issue is I'm not willing to
take that chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
You coached high school cross country and track. How did that shape your perspective, seeing kids up close during both the good and the bad?
I really came to appreciate the value of the sports when I saw the kids up close, because it's so intense. I mean, running is like a really intense sport in that it's all about pain tolerance. How much suffering can you bear and how hard can you push through it? And of course, talent. But seeing kids strive and get better and then like crush it in something, it was just so exciting. It was exhilarating. And so I felt so great for them. I never expected to feel their victories as if they were my own, but I really did. It was like so gratifying and rewarding. And I really came to appreciate the sports even more because of that, because I could see how much it served them. Both track and cross country, it was similar, because it's all about running and racing and performing. I really came to appreciate the sport even more. And I came into it with great appreciation because I know it has done that for me. It's built these strong relationships and there's no hiding. That's the other thing when you're out there. There's no hiding, especially on the track. Like if you're slow, it's like It's there for everybody to see. And the other thing, because I really only coached girls at the high school level, I think it was so valuable to them because they're so often given the message that you got to look great and be thin and beautiful and constantly looking in the mirror. And you're removed from that when you're on the playing field. That doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with your performance. And I think that's kind of liberating for the girls.
In the book, you paint a pretty stark picture of what youth sports have become. Early specialization, pressure, costs. Why do you think we let it get so far from play and joy?
I think it evolved this way because there's nothing to stop it from evolving this way. A friend and colleague, Dion Kohler, just wrote a book on the legal aspect of youth sports and how we basically allowed it to evolve into a system run and managed by the private sector and with no limits, essentially, except for depending on parent rights, so parents, I believe parents ought to be able to, govern what their kids do for the most part. And that's how the system is set up, so that it's a parent's say and there's no sort of government entity as other countries have that might put limits or even guidelines. It's just kind of like it's a disordered, chaotic sort of, you set up shop and I could go into town and buy a little booth and offer coaching lessons. Of course, I have been a coach, but I could offer any kind of like athletic coaching or mental coaching because there are no real standards. And that's how we have let our system evolve. And there's really, it's hard to turn that ship around now. And it's a variety of factors that got us here. A lot of it is the money. There's a lot of people profiting off parents' anxiety, in my view, parents' ambitions for their kids. And it's really hard to resist that when you're, like Troy, you got little kids, sports are important to you. It's hard to resist that extra thing. So that's a part of it. Another part is how we have come to view childhood differently and children differently. And that's for large sort of, cultural factors like the family size has shrunk. So kids, there are fewer of them, so they're more precious. So we have higher hopes with each of them. We have had economic anxiety and worries about the future. The majority of parents are worried and concerned that kids aren't going to do as well as they did. So the stakes are higher. And we also have, contributing to the rise of youth sports, the intensity of them is stranger danger, this fear that something terrible is going to happen if kids need to be supervised constantly. So youth sports are a great way to keep them safe. And we all love sports. What could possibly go wrong? So it just has led to this kind of growth, uncontrolled growth of youth sports that are not always in the best interest of kids and their families, is how I would describe it. Not that sports don't have value, but that the way they have been warped, in my view, has not been helpful to kids or families.
Yeah, I look at the two things that, like the two main reasons for me personally is, one, I think the life lessons, there's things you can learn in sports that are really hard to learn outside of sports. And that's like the teamwork and the camaraderie, the ups and the downs. And it's like a safe place to learn it. Like when
Go ahead.
Well, like when you have like I played quarterback and like I throw an interception, it's such a bad feeling. And the feeling of having to be like, all right, next play, like we'll try it again. And then like you overcome that, like learning adversity is so much safer in sports than learning it in life. Like learning adversity in life stinks. And in sports, it stinks too, but it's like there's such guardrails on it. And then the second thing is, and I know you want to talk about the first one, but the second thing is then just like what I was saying with my siblings, like kind of gaming the system to get into better schools or better situations, I guess. But so those are the main two reasons for me personally.
Well, and I have had the same thought about the life lessons, that if you're up there, I was in a championship softball game. It was a county championship, and I was shortstop, and we were ahead, and it was ninth inning or seventh. I think we might have only played 7 innings. And I think there was one person on base, and the person hit a grounder to me, and I flubbed it. I got off, nervous, and I overthrew first base. And at the end of 5 minutes later, we lost. And it was horrifying, I mean, as you know, it's like if you throw an interception, if you blow the game somehow. And it's like, it is hard to get that in other aspects of life. And we all like to think that makes us more resilient. I'm not sure it's true, but we like to think that. I also wonder if you're the lead in a play and you forget your lines, is that any different? If have the piano solo and, you screw it up and you hit the wrong keys, or if you're working after school and you forgot to carry out an order that, now the whole store is in crisis. I think we need to think of maybe that sports are not the only way to get some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I have had that very same feeling, I'm just not sure that it's not true in other domains as well.
Yeah, I think you can in other places, but I think it's like when in football, when you mess something up, a lot of coaches say like, hey, there's another, the other team puts on pads too, right? Or like, and I was in college, like he's on scholarship too. It's like they're not. So I think, but if maybe it's repetitions, I don't know, because it's like the piano solo, maybe there's one concert. When I was in school, I don't know anything about that world really, but when I was in school, there'd be like, one or two concerts, I feel like a year, or maybe it was once every 3 months. I don't know how it was.
Right.
Whereas like your softball season, like that was awful that you had that play, but you still like got to, get a next at bat, and that game was over, but you got to play like, there's so many more games, there's so many more opportunities to kind of like redeem yourself.
Yes. And I understand. And even in that particular season, I think the next game was a state championship because we were a really good team. And I hit I still remember this, the double that got our rally going. And then
there you go.
So it was like, redemption. And that feels really good. I just, I'm not sure if it really makes a difference into what kind of people we are as we grow, as we get older. I don't know. We don't know that. We think that, but we don't know that.
Yeah. And I said two things. There's one other, I'll jump in one more. I said to like my two younger siblings that both, my sister finished college, my younger brother's starting college next year. Mm-hmm. And I said, like, one of the best things about sports is like, I think your confidence stuff, if you're even if you're like just a good player, you don't have to be like an all-star. I think it helps with confidence. But what I said to them is like, when you show up on campus, you have, depending on the team size, 50 friends or 50 or 100, like your teammates. It's like, I think for me personally, like it was a huge advantage. Like when I got to college and there was just this group of people that I knew, I didn't have to be like, I didn't walk around campus not knowing anybody. There's just like kind of like you have like almost like a fallback social group too, which I think is helpful for all ages.
Yes, I agree. No, it's like an instant social group. And I also felt that with my son who played all the sports growing up. And then by the time he got to middle school, all the different elementary schools converged at middle school. So he went in with such an advantage because he knew all these kids from these different teams, different schools. So it was like instant. He was so much more at ease, I think, because he had friends already. And I agree, that's a big plus with sports.
So I think sports, there's nothing that sports gives you that you can't get outside of sports. I just think it gives it to you in a much easier way.
Well, I can see it's maybe more direct, more, the quickest, most economical way to learn some of those things.
You talk about how youth sports now reflect the anxieties of modern parenting. What are we asking of our kids when we make sports this intense?
Well, this is my main problem with the way we've done them, in that the stakes are so much higher. for kids, that sports become less about fun and growth and friendship and more about performance and stress, pressure, at younger and younger ages. I think we're asking too much of them, and I think we need to give them opportunities to be children and to kind of set their own path. Um, you know, I'm a big fan of unstructured play because we know that it creates opportunities to have autonomy. Kids can manage their own stuff. They can get better at what they're doing, whether it's capture the flag or whatever they're doing, or stick wiffle ball. And they can do it with friends and organic friend groups. And when we make organized youth sports with their relentless focus on performance and achievement and getting better and making the next team, that sucks all that out of it, I think. But not that there isn't something to be gained, especially if you're good. But I think it's a real loss for kids when we turn it into this high pressure thing that is just more for the parents in some ways. No offense, Troy.
No, I was just going to say, I completely agree with you, but I'm a hypocrite on it. I joke with my wife. I don't know if you remember, do you remember the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, and it's like the Green Goblin is another famous actor, and that, like, the mask talks to him?
Yes.
I say to my wife jokingly, not really, that like that's how I feel like with youth sports with my kids. I'm like, I can hear the craziness inside me saying like, look, if you want to be better, do X, Y, and Z, or you got to do it every day, or before school, you got to go. But it's like, I have to keep pushing that voice back, but it is crazy. It's crazy.
Well, and that's why I think the youth sports industry recognizes that parents have a hard time with this, that it feels like a reflection of you, how your child does. And that's why you can get so wrapped up in it. And that's why I was, walking tall in the parking lot when my third grader, scored the winning basket. It's because it feels like a reflection of you. And it just takes on this importance that is disproportionate to what it actually is. Because most kids, the vast majority of kids, are going to finish their athletic career, if they have one, when they leave high school. It's 6 to 7% of kids go on to play in college. 2% go to the pros. So it's like, this is just a short window, in kids' lives. And as a parent, you're a parent and they're home with you for like 18 years. But, do you want the whole thing to be sports? Like some people would say, I think that's great. We're together, we're always cheering, rah, rah, we're busy every day. Great. And if you love that, more power to you. But I guess I think there's more to life than that. And, it's nice to have other interests, and I'm not saying your kids don't and that they're not exposed to other things, but
no, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
When it becomes all about sports, it can be very narrowing.
Yeah,
I don't know if
I agree.
your question, Tim.
I think there probably is like some subconscious level of like, you see like when I'm thinking, I'm like, there's no way that that's what it is, but I'm sure there probably is some layer of that. As much as I would hate to admit it, I don't think that there is, but I think that I could see how that would play a factor. The thing that gets like just like a euphoria dump for me is like when using my son as an example, like when I see him like practicing, he loves hockey. When I see him like practicing a move, practicing it, not getting it, falling down, falling on the ice, and then like when it clicks and like seeing his face light up, it's just like, it's so fun.
Yeah, I know. That's like being a coach when you see them get it or they develop. Yeah. So great. It's like a euphoria dump, as you put it. I mean, it feels great.
Yeah.
And
which is
no
still
shame.
Kind of a selfish reason, I guess.
Well, I don't, I think it's a little churlish to get angry at parents for feeling proud. Like you should feel pride. And that's okay. It's just, I think when it takes on a life of its own, so that kids are playing sports in order to please their parents because they can see how happy it makes their parents, which brings me to this bit of advice that I really love. And it's from a coach and author named Steve Magnus, who has written a lot. He's a coach of Olympic runners. And one of his bits of advice to parents is don't make a big deal of their successes athletically. Like, don't, like to kind of be matter of fact about it so that the kids don't see, oh, I get chocolate milk when I score, or they really love me when I do well. But when I don't do so well, then it's water with ice cubes, like they don't want kids to see you loving them more when they do better on the playing field. And I think that's great advice. And then also it's a reminder, like it's their thing. It's not our thing. I always feel like parents get confused. I hear constantly talking about, we're going to Maryland for a soccer tournament, or we're going to Virginia for lacrosse. Like, we've got a game this weekend? Who's got a game? There's just a lot of confusion, and it becomes like the parents' thing. And I think that's where it gets unhealthy, especially for the kids, because it's their thing. I mean, when you grew up, Troy, did your mom and dad, I don't know, you can answer, like, was it their thing? Were they
No,
like,
people always, not always, but when I was younger and I was playing, people used to ask me stuff, especially like with my dad playing in the NFL and all that. And I used to say that, and it's a true story, you can play soccer and football up until, in our town, up until seventh grade is where you have to make a decision. And at
yeah,
that point, soccer was my favorite sport at that point up until, I loved football, but I wasn't on like the youth teams. I didn't do youth football. I'd play like pickup football and stuff like that. But anyways, my dad said to me, he's like, listen, I really think that you should strongly consider playing soccer. You love it. You're really good at it. You have all your friends are on the, I have a lot of friends on the team, which is like, most people think like, oh, your dad playing the NFL, you have to play football. But I will say this, with my dad, and we're in different rooms, so he can't grab me. When I was in high school, like when I was in high school playing football, it was very, I mean, it was very different. And I think my dad coached how he was coached. My dad was like, and I think it's funny saying I'm obviously very biased, love my dad and we're like best friends, but my dad was known like by other people on the team, not just me. He was really, really tough, but always really fair.
mm-hmm.
So like, if you made a good play, like it wasn't, or if you made a bad play, it's not like you were in trouble or anything like that. But if it was just like a mental error, like
yeah,
I'll make up an example. If I threw an interception, I would come to the sideline, and typically the quarterback's like discouraged or whatever. He'd like tap me on the helmet, be like, "Hey buddy, we'll get him next time." Like, we're going to keep coming out throwing. But if I threw an interception because it was supposed to be a run play and I just threw it up in the air or something like that. If I had like if it was a physical mistake, he was very encouraging. Like, we got this. If it was a mental
yeah,
mistake, like preparation mistake, he'd be like, whatever. He'd be tough on you, I'll say.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think being tough coach, being a fair coach, the way I just think of it in my book was that the best coaches have both strength and warmth. You're strong enough, the sport, you've enough confidence in what you know, and you have enough confidence to trust kids that you don't have to control everything they do. That demonstration of that strength, I think, is really important in a coach, but also warmth, which obviously your dad did that because you knew he cared about you and he wanted you to do well because he was upset because he really cared about you.
My dad gave this speech that would probably made you shiver if you heard it, where he said to all the parents, like all the parents, all the players came in the auditorium, and he was like, listen, football is fun when you win. When you lose in football, it is not a fun sport. And I can say firsthand, that is very true. But I know that's a big thing for you, is like, it's not just about the outcomes. But again, my dad helped coach when I was in modified, and it was none of that. It was like, we're going to have fun. Like, of course we were trying to win and we were competitive, but it was all like, everyone, like my dad was known for being like so fun and being out there. And then like when we got to varsity, like we're 17, 18-year-olds, like it's time to win. And he was still very fun, but yeah, it was about winning.
But that's appropriate at that age. It's not appropriate when they're 8. I think it's totally appropriate. Like, this is not, you're not here just to like mess around in after school when you're a junior and senior. Like, you have a purpose and you're mature enough to be able to rally around that purpose. It's when that becomes the goal when they're little kids that it's screwed up, in my opinion. And by the way, I did a little looking into what fun, how, like, sometimes there's this view like, oh, it's about more than fun. They need to learn how to compete. Well, according to this one researcher who studied how athletes view fun, she found the top 3 attributes were that this is how athletes define fun was working hard in a positive environment with a positive coach. So I think this idea that having fun means you're not really trying, you're just goofing off. That has certainly been my experience. My sports experiences were most fun when we were really working and we were like a team and cohesive and we all wanted it. And the coach was like my softball coach, who was, for the most part positive, but really into it. Like, that was fun. And anyway, I just throw that out there.
No, I think that's spot on. I think to me, the only tweak I would have is like when you work hard and it pays off. Because like when you work really hard and then you go through like the physical punishment of football and then you lose at the end, it like really stinks. But when everything you said, like if you work hard and you win, but your coach is terrible, it's not really that much fun.
Yeah.
Or if you're working hard, but the rest of your team isn't, and you win, it's not that much fun. So I think you're right, but I do think. So I think you and I are actually much closer on this than I originally thought.
I do too.
I think it's wherever each sport individualized, there's a critical age. And what that is, I don't know. But like for football, let's say 17, 18, you mentioned gymnastics, maybe it's 13 or 14, whatever. At that point, making it about winning and being intense about it, you think is a good thing, right?
Absolutely. If you as the,
if it's a kid's passion.
If it's a kid's passion, absolutely. Then, like I said, and they should have a path to college. That's totally appropriate. It's when it's not their interest and they're doing it for some other purpose that has nothing to do with genuine interest in the sport or athleticism or care for the team. That's the other thing. Then that's when I think it gets warped. But I completely agree that, and specializing, I think once you're, later in high school, I know kids specialize in like elementary school now, but I don't think it's inappropriate for juniors in high school to specialize, give up all their other sports. And they may look back with regret at having done that, but I don't think from an athlete development point of view, it's a bad idea to specialize as a junior.
I agree, but I think it's the critical, like, so my brother-in-law plays in the NHL, and he said that like when they're all hockey players, I don't remember the exact age, 12, 13 or 14, one of those years, he's like, that's considered playing, like being a multi-sport athlete in hockey means you play until that age. And then it's, of course, then in their eyes, it's like, of course it's all hockey after that.
12 or 13.
I can't remember the exact age, but we had another NHL player. His name is Charlie McAvoy. He plays for the Boston Bruins. He's like one of their alternate captains, unbelievable player. And he's like, yeah, I played football until I couldn't. And to me, in my head, that means high school. And I'm like, oh, so how was your team or something? He's like, no, I played till like, I think it's 13, like whatever, maybe it's 14, whenever high school starts, like it's hockey, becomes hockey year round.
Yeah. Well, you have to work with the system you have too. I mean, if you can't play anymore, it's either all or nothing, and you are gung ho, then you're obviously going to do that.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think I acknowledge. I'm on your camp. I think it's so crazy, but I don't know how to. I'm not going to be the first parent to put in the arms race to put down.
To lay down your nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, here's a little fun fact about ice hockey. You may already know this, but sometimes when I hear about the people devoting all these resources to their little kids playing ice hockey with the thought that maybe they'll get a scholarship, it's at least a third of college ice hockey players are from overseas.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're just even competing against your fellow Americans. You're competing against Canadians, Germans, and British people.
which makes the arms race that much more
That
serious.
much more serious. Yeah. So anyway,
No, I agree with you. Like I said, I think we're closer than not, but I'm also,
you're not
I
willing
don't
to
know.
like take that leap.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's very, and not to make them making this all about me, but my daughter, at least right now, she's 6. She's less inclined to sports. So like I don't do any. I try and like have it be an option, and if she wants to, we'll do it. But my son, who's like everything's hockey with him, so we go like there he goes with a coach. We'll skate a couple, a lot more than most people will. But he's saying to me, it's not like I'm saying like he comes home from school and says, whatever, I want to color pictures, and I'm like, no, we're going to
Yeah.
the
Yeah. We're going to
rink.
the ice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I would, and I think that's really tricky, especially when your kid is gung ho. Is he the 4-year-old?
yeah,
Okay. Well, just a rule of thumb you might be aware of, want to be aware of, and I think all parents should be, is that, two. One is that kids should not train for more hours per week than years they are old. That would be 4 hours a week.
yep,
And that the structured to unstructured play should not exceed 2 to 1, that ratio. So if he's practicing 2 hours a week, he should be, playing on the ice with you or whomever for at least an hour a week. And
hmm
it's when it gets out of whack so that most of the play is structured, that's when kids get injured. And that's a bigger problem for girls. Girls are less apt to play sports in an unstructured setting.
hmm.
Just FYI. I think it's good to
Oh,
keep
that's
those
good.
things in mind. So in case you feel like, oh, wow, my 4-year-old's playing 14 hours a week of ice hockey, he's probably going
Yeah,
to get
we're
hurt.
not at that, but it is crazy. It's probably more than 4, but not probably I don't know, probably around. If I had to guess, I'd say probably around 6 hours a week.
Mhm.
But just kind of guessing. I'm thinking like an hour when we go, and he normally goes. We go 5 to 6 times a week. I bring him, but most of the time I would say it's more unstructured than structured, because most of the time it's just him, and he plays with like kids who are slightly older, and they just all skating around shooting and
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's much, much better. It really is much better because they're not following somebody's instructions. They're not where they're more apt to push themselves beyond what they're capable of.
yeah.
Um, so that's good.
I break a lot of the rules though. So
Well, but now you have this knowledge in your head, so you can
yeah,
provide a check on yourself.
I got a lot of soul searching.
One thing you emphasize is how much pressure parents feel. How do you think we got to the point where being a good parent sometimes means being a part-time sports manager?
Well, I think it all goes back to the changed notion, the changed kind of definition of what it means to be a good parent. Um, Last August, the then Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, put out an advisory for parents saying parents are suffering, forget about kid mental health. Parents are suffering. Their mental health is suffering because they're spending more time than any prior generation with their kids, not just, driving them hither and yon for games, but, playing games, getting on the floor, trying to cultivate their every possible interest. And parents are doing this at the expense of their own well-being, their marriages if they're married, their their friendships, because they feel this incredible pressure to make sure their kids are okay. And I think it's partly goes back to that idea of there are fewer families have fewer kids now, so they're scarcer and therefore more precious. Um, Also, just this sort of we have this kind of belief system in our country, which is sort of subconscious, that it's the parent's job it's solely the parent's job to raise kids, and that how those kids turn out is a function of parenting strategies and what they're doing or not doing to develop their kids. So, if you kind of believe that, and it's sort of in the air. It's not something it's like, oh yeah, I guess I do kind of think that therefore your kid's a reflection of you. So, if they blow it in the last minute of the game, it's embarrassing and it feels like, well, I screwed up as a parent. And it's funny to think about it that way, because when I was a child, and Tim, maybe when you were a child, I doubt your parents viewed your every move as somehow an indication of their skills. I know with mine, I'm the youngest of 5, and my parents were busy. My father worked, my mother was involved in a ton of things, and they certainly cared about us and wanted us to do well. But the idea that like how I performed in a softball game would somehow redound back to her was crazy. Or my father, like what? They had their own lives. They had social lives. They had friends. They had volunteer work. They weren't utterly wrapped up in our lives. And I think something is lost when parents are totally wrapped up in their kids' lives, because, well, what's lost are those adult friendships, the marriage, if there is one, the larger, we've had this loss of community now. And I think it's partly a reflection of this obsession with kids, our own kids. And it's like one of those subtle changes that's happened over the last several decades related to family size and divorce. There's more divorce, so kids are split up between homes, the economy. All of these disparate factors have gotten us to where we are now. So where it feels like you're a bad parent if you're not spending $10,000 on your kids, soccer, for your kids' soccer camp. And I don't know about you, but I doubt your parents would have felt that way.
No, definitely not for me.
Yeah.
I think too, part of it is like the travel teams.
Yes.
My younger brother has been on the one that he's going to college next year, his senior in high school. He's been on like a travel lacrosse team that plays basically every weekend, every summer since he was, I don't know how old, 8. Let's just say 8, or you can say 10 even. I think it was 8. And it's like my parents every summer, my dad and my mom, even my dad, like before ALS and after ALS, like he's in, they're driving the van down, they're doing, and they're at every single, because I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. I don't know how you stop that too.
Well, it kind of feels like you're a bad parent if you're not there. You're a bad parent if you're not out the game. And I really just dispute that. I think it's probably helpful to kids to not have their parents there at every game, because it underscores the fact that the game is for them, not for you, parent, even though you really want to see them play. And here's an example I often think of when I kind of realized that this stuff it's not just in sports either. When my daughter was a junior in high school, she's my oldest, she had a prom date, and it was just me at home, and her date was able to drive, so he came and picked her up. And they came in, and I took pictures, okay, go have fun. They went to their pre-prom party, which was like in a town about 20 minutes away. And I got a call from another mother saying, where are you? Where are you? You're not at the pre-prom party. I'm like, what? Not my prom. But this is now parents go to the pre-prom parties. It's like their kids' lives are our lives. And and we couldn't possibly miss the pre-prom party. And there's something a little weird about that. It's like, let them have their lives. But I did go to the future pre-prom parties, in fairness. I caved.
I was going to say, I'm with you on the pre-prom parties.
But I loved,
the athlete, I loved having my parents. My parents, I think, came to every one of my games. I loved it, but I get how there could be more pressure there. I think it probably depends on the relationship too. With
yes. Right. If the child can't perform without the parent in the stands, because the child's always looking up like, what do I do now? Or just needs that like reassurance, that's not good for the kid. The kid should be, and really, I'm sure, Tim, you would agree that kids should be looking to their coach for advice on what to do in a game, not the parent up in the stands, And I can't tell you how often I've seen that at games where the kids are like looking around for mom and dad, like, what do I do now? And that's not right. It should be the coach. And, kids need to learn that. And coaches are always saying it, but so that's why I encourage parents to sometimes skip games because, go have coffee with a friend, go out to dinner with your partner or whatever, and like reclaim your life. That's what I said.
What toll does this take not just on kids, but on families, siblings, and even marriages?
Well, that's it. There is a broader, there is a side effect of this obsessive fixation on youth sports. And let me add that a recent Aspen Institute study pointed out it was with about 1,800 parents to get a sense of how much they're spending and how much time they're devoting to their kids' sports. And I almost don't believe it, but these parents reported that they spent an average of 202 minutes a day on their kids' sports. Okay, so that's 3 hours and 20 minutes, I think, of a day on their kids' sports, which is probably averaged out so they spend time on the weekends and, 10 hours at a tournament. So it's not actually 3 hours a day. But that is a shocking amount of time to devote to
that's
your
crazy.
And there's a cost, and that cost is to marriages. And as the Surgeon General pointed out, parents feel this pressure that they have to do everything for their kids and make so many sacrifices for their kids that they're typically, if you've got more than one child and more than one child is playing sports, you're dividing and conquering constantly. One spouse goes one way to take the kid to basketball and the other takes the other child to soccer. So it has an effect on marriages. It has an effect on the parents' ability of fitness levels. They're typically sacrificing their own like athletic goals or just exercise for their kids. So they're not going to go for a run. They're going to take their kid to the game. It has an effect on employment patterns because it is very, very hard to manage all of these kids in their sports with 2 full-time jobs. And so typically it's the woman who will change her career path. There's one woman I spoke to while I was doing the research for the book, and she told me she had 2 kids, both in high school. One was a freshman and one was a junior, I believe. And she said she was so exhausted, and she said I had to scale back from full-time to part-time because it was just I couldn't handle it. All the driving, so much driving, 40 minutes here and there for specialized coaches and games, and it was overwhelming.
Well, I was almost always your guy's coach.
Wait, say that again?
He was always the coach.
Oh. So you were always the coach saying you got to be there?
No, he was I said that I liked my parents at the games.
Oh.
Yeah, you're pretty much always the coach. You know what I was thinking about though, Dad, while Linda was talking is there were sports like I did that I wasn't like just basketball. Like I played basketball, but I really wasn't into it. I just kind of did it as something to do. And you guys wouldn't come to all those games, and rightfully so. I'm not saying it in a blaming way. I'm happy you didn't. There wasn't a lot to see. But the point being is like trying to think. I mean, I don't think, but you guys would do stuff like, hey, can you ride with your friends to that game, or like do carpooling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the time, especially when I was younger, you were the coach for every sport.
Well, that makes it easy to dictate the schedule. It's somebody's birthday, no practice.
Yeah.
A lot of this seems driven by fear, as you can also hear firsthand from Troy. Fear of falling behind, of missing out. What's the antidote to that kind of cultural anxiety?
I wish I had a good answer for you. This is what you have to grapple with, Troy, because that's what you're feeling with your kids, this fear of like falling behind, fear of missing out. I guess I think it takes a little, and I don't want to sound like, oh, I was so great at this either, because I did plenty of this nonsense that I think I look back on and think was foolish. I think ultimately, you know, you have to think about what really matters to you and what is going to make your children, what's going to help your children become the adults you want them to become. And it requires thinking over the long term. And that's really, really hard to do when your children are like everyone. There's this undercurrent of competition among parents and their kids and who's doing what. And, maybe we should try that. And this undercurrent, which can really shape the way you raise your kids. And I think ultimately it's about knowing what's important to you and, staying true to that. So, for example, if you want your kids to become independent and to have good character, then sometimes these pressures take away from that larger goal of, say, independence. Or maybe it would be better, rather than to be a part of a team where they're like really not into it, better to have a part-time job. You develop more independence if you had a part-time job. Thinking about character, well, if you have to rouse your kid out of bed every day on the Saturday to go play in the tournament, and there's no time for them to make their bed or do any chores because they got to get to the game, is that building character? Like, that's not contributing to like family life or going beyond the self. So I just think it takes a lot of sort of grappling with what you're doing and what your values are, and is this contributing over the long term to that goal? And what do I really want for my child? And being honest also about what present company accepted. You're not going to be a pro athlete. You're not going to the Olympics, and that's fine. Like, that's great. And sports have their place, and it's wonderful to strive and to win and to get better. And that's a vehicle for learning. But there's more in there too that matters. And again, I compare it to school. Is it about getting the grade or is it about learning? And I think you should always err towards what are you learning? And I know that goes against the grain because it's all about tests and scores and all that. But ultimately, you want your children to be curious, I think, and interested and able to exercise. Like, in my view, like, I want them to be able to exercise and to enjoy athletics when they're adults. And this may not be leading to that. By the way, kids who specialize at younger ages are much less apt to be active as adults. So, there is this trade-off, and there's such a short-term focus that it's easy to go in a direction that's not going to lead them down to where you want them to end up.
You may not have all the answers, but you are a lot closer than we are. One of the things that I particularly liked was that you don't just diagnose the problem, you offer hope. What are some of the most promising changes you're seeing at the local or school level?
Well, I would say there are some movements I've seen locally that some parents who are not happy about the intensity or the early intensity and the cost are, they've, in my community and in Atlanta, there's this movement to get more pickup sports. So there's a pickup sports app in Atlanta, and I don't know if it spreads since there, but where kids can kind of go organize after school, like go on their app and who's around, and we'll meet at the park in 20 minutes.
That's really cool.
So it doesn't require, it's using technology in a good way, in my view. And there's something like that in my community recently that I just found out about, where, kids are going independently to fields and playing on their own. So that's a good thing. There's also some schools are really doing things right. One of the schools I wrote about is one, it's in Tuscarora High School, I think it's called, in Tuscarora, Maryland, where the athletic department has made a concerted effort to expand options for sports options in the school. And part of this is because, which we haven't talked about, is that so many low-income kids don't have sports options at all because the private enterprise is dictating the terms, and a lot of those families can't play. They can't afford it. So if schools can step up, like this one in Tuscarora, that fills a gap for the lower income kids and also for the kids who just want to play, but maybe they're not good enough to make the basketball team. This is a small team. You're a big school. It's really hard to make the varsity basketball team. And at that high school, they offer unified sports, which are sports for children with intellectual disabilities and kids who are more mainstream. And they offer adaptive sports like wheelchair basketball, and they have clubs and intramurals. And so they're just really making better use of the space so that more kids can play. And I'm a big believer in that. And also just getting kids moving more, because I think we have this mental health crisis with kids in the country. We know that they're like floundering, and exercise is so good to keep depression and anxiety at bay. So anything that schools can do to increase the amount of movement kids are doing, I think is great. Also at the state level, many states have started funding, offering funding to communities where there's not enough money, locally. Chicago, Illinois, the Illinois State House budgeted something like $10 million to fund sports programs in low-income areas. Philadelphia's done this. Like, these are like positive things. It's, it's not all doom and gloom. And like, people recognize that there are drawbacks to our current model, and that we can both improve it at the lower income level by offering more public options. And, I don't know what I could say about the private level, except, some parents are not happy about the trends, and they're trying to find ways around it. So that's good.
Hey, what's the best thing a parent can do if they want to reset their child's relationship with sports, especially if it's already become too much?
I would finish whatever season they're in, and then like take a break, and set aside time to really talk about and think about with the child what's going on. Do they want to keep doing this? Kind of drill down into what's really going on. And is it a confidence thing? Do they think they're not good enough? Is it, and they're falling behind? Is it they just don't like the sport anymore? They're sick of it. And I've seen this with I profile a couple in my book, a swimmer who they're just overwhelmed by, they just didn't want to do it anymore. So to kind of get to the bottom of it. And, I think it's always the parent's job is mostly to be loving and supporting and help them, support them in their decision, especially if they're a little bit older, and say high school kids. And, we support you and we love you, whether you play football or soccer or not. And I don't want you to quit. I don't want you to give it up, impulsively. Just take some time to think about it, and we can come back and revisit it, tomorrow and in a week. Take a break, get some distance from it. And that's fine if you want to take a break. If you want to give it up, that's fine too. That's your decision. Kind of to just be a loving support for the child and let it be it's their life. And so often kids' opinions and perspectives are left out, which is strange to me, but, it's the adults kind of plotting child's path and leaving the child's interests out of it. The child, I say, even high school, the adults have a plan and the kids just kind of along for the ride. And the more we can turn it back to the kids and have it be their path, their decision, the better.
What did your own kids teach you during this whole journey? How did your perspective evolve as a parent?
That is a great question that I have not gotten yet. And because I had sort of three kids, each of whom had a very different relationship with sports, I learned to appreciate their perspectives. So my oldest participated, she was one of those kids, she was a participant. She was not hardcore in any way, shape, or form, but she really loved being on a team. She had friends on the teams, and she enjoyed that. And I came to appreciate Whereas in the past, I might have been a little more dismissive of the, half in kids. I came to appreciate that this was providing something really valuable for her, even though she wasn't hardcore at all. She had friendships. Her time was occupied in a constructive way. And it was a net positive. And that altered my view somewhat. My middle child was violently anti-organized sport. He's one of those kids who's like, I don't like this. The jocks get all the attention. There was an initiative in our high school to allow kids playing varsity sports to not have to do gym, which on its face makes a lot of sense because, they're already getting their exercise, and let them do their homework. And his point was, well, I'm working after school. I could use that time to do my homework. Why are they special? Why are they, elevated above the rest of us? So hearing that point of view was also interesting and made me appreciate that the perspective of those who aren't in, the sports hierarchy in school, that sports can be very overwhelming when you're not an athlete. And, there's so much emphasis on sports when you're not an athlete, and that I think it's important to consider their point of view. And then my youngest, who was very good, I think I might have mentioned that he did very well in that third grade basketball game. He actually did very well. I came to realize that I cared too much, and I also relay in the book a story of us going to this AAU. No, it was a camp. There were a couple things, but there was one summer camp thing. It was like 2 days or 3 days. And it was something I encouraged him to do. It was like all academic camp or something like that. And when I went to pick him up, he was like, this is awful. I hate this. And I could kind of like the scales fell from my eyes about what this experience was. It was just like a bunch of kids showing off for like college coaches. There was no, all the value of sports, the camaraderie, the community, the work, the joint work. That was nothing. It was nothing like that. And I just came to appreciate the point of view for a child that this is, you can take it too far. So all of them really taught me something about sports.
Obviously, I have had some major setbacks, but I have my faith in Jesus Christ that has been my source of strength. Have you ever had a major setback, and do you have any system of faith?
I've not had any kind of setback like you've had. There have been some health issues in my my original family that have been really challenging. Some mental health issues that have been, very, very hard to deal with over time, and that kind of defy easy answers. My parents had a history, both died of neurological issues. One was Alzheimer's, the other Parkinson's. So that's like a worry kind of hovering over my head at all times. It's funny. Do I have a system? I'm not religious. I don't, I've just kind of adopted what I consider sort of secular values of the golden rule, sort of, that it's our obligation to treat other people the way we want to be treated, to be kind, and to set a good example, and to do for the next generation, to give back to the next generation. I mean, that's what I was trying to do as a coach. That's not really I used to say I wish I had faith because I think it would be really sustaining, especially when times get tough, and they do. They will, they have. But I can't make myself believe something I don't believe. So I just believe I get by on just trying to do what I think is the right thing, the moral thing, the good thing, to the extent that I can.
At the end of each episode, I ask our guests to brag about their own family.
Oh.
So please take a moment and tell us about yours. Please include what your kids are up to And what did they take away from their own sports experience?
That is a great question. You really do ask great questions, Tim. They're like slightly different from what I've gotten, and I really appreciate them. Okay, so first of all, my husband, who is amazing and just could not be more supportive of my endeavors in every way. He's also amazingly talented. He's retired now, but had been an executive, and is just a gifted thinker and leader. And for years, after he retired, he joined the emergency medical. He became an EMT. I don't know what the abbreviation is, but because he had that same feeling of wanting to give back and needing to make a contribution. We both feel like, we're very fortunate. How can we make a contribution? And that's what he did, including during the pandemic, which was really scary. And his athletics have also been very interesting for me because he was a great high school football player and baseball player and basketball player. And so he and we kind of affirm each other's opinions to some extent in that his family was very interested in his sporting career, which was kind of a little bit of a mystery to me, why they would care so much. But it's a big part of his life. It remains a big part of his life. He's a runner, and he's just a very talented, extremely talented athlete, sub 3-hour marathoner, despite his size. And he's been like wonderful to discuss
Mm-hmm.
all these ideas with, and he's an amazing person. My daughter, the one who was like the participant, she's active. That's all I want is for my kids to be active. Like, don't sit around. She's very active, and she's had a great career. And I think I mentioned to you, Tim, earlier, she's a literary agent. And to the point about sports and learning, I often think when she was in kindergarten, it was like she wasn't reading yet. And this was like a cause for concern because if your child's not reading, what is going on? And I was like, that's ridiculous. So this is where you got to stay true to yourself. I'm like, that's ridiculous. In other countries, they don't do anything until they're 7 or 8. Like, forget it. Like, let's just relax. But she started reading in first grade and then just never stopped. And it's just become immensely well educated and literate in everything related to books. So that was a little confirmation. And she's very creative and original and grounded. And my middle son, who was the violently opposed to youth sports or violently opposed to organized sports, he is now in Denver working in a vet's office, and he's a loyal runner now. So he didn't do the organized stuff, but he saw the example my husband and I gave, and running is a big part of his life, as it has been mine. And my youngest, who lives in Boston, engaged, he very active. He's very disciplined, very incredibly conscientious, and he's just ran a 2:47 marathon. So he's like a very good runner too. So it's kind of stayed in the family, and I'm really happy about that. I'm happy that he has that. And for both my two boys, running is a cathartic, and it becomes essential. When I had little children, I think I would have died had I not been able to run, because it just was so talk about a reset. It was like such a reset for the daily grind of having little kids. And I can see that it's that way for them too. And so I really value exercise and sports for them and what it can do for you, which is one reason why I want them to be able to play. I think parents would want their kids to have that option as they get older, not just be a star in 8th grade.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
I think it was after my daughter was born, because it was a really hard labor, and she's my first child. And it was just such an incredible amount of relief and joy in having this little creature. And she was healthy, and it was just such an incredibly close moment for me, my husband and me. And, there's something ineffable about having a child that is, there's nothing like it. And I'm sure Tim, well, you too, Troy, you have children, would understand that it's something, it's a rare moment. It's really rare, but that was probably the happiest moment. Also to have that labor over, it's not pleasant. And with the other two kids as well, but that because she was my first, that was maybe the happiest moment in my life.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
I studied at Oxford when I was out of college. I finished in 85 and then I went to Oxford. And it was really hard for me at the first, I was there for 2 years. The first half of the first year was really, really hard for me. I felt lonely, depressed, kind of lost. And I was away from my family. And of course we didn't have phones to check in with texts constantly. So I felt very cut off, and I was also cold all the time because they don't have good central heating and it was freezing. So I would say that was like the hardest several months. Was that the whole question, or how did I get out of it? Was that part of it also?
You could talk about that. Yeah.
Well, I just persevered, I just made friends finally and adjusted, but it was probably the hardest time in my life.
What are you most excited about?
2026 elections. Okay, no, let me change that. I'm sorry, let me change that. Okay. It's true, I am very excited about those elections, but I'm more excited about my son's upcoming wedding, which will be it'll be in the fall of 2026. So I'm really excited about that. He's marrying a lovely young woman who we adore. They're a great couple. They're like hopelessly adorable. And we're really excited about that. So that's what I'm looking most forward to.
That was a good change. All right, let's do the next one. What advice would you give your younger self?
Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. It's not, I was so hard on myself, and I think that's something you learn with any luck. You learn to be a little more forgiving. I wish that I had learned that a little earlier.
I've never asked this before, and we've asked this on 50 whatever episodes, but I just last night listened to this podcast with a psychologist on there who said, anytime you hear that question, people's advice almost all the time is advice they still need to this day. Do you think you need that to this?
Oh God, yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Just to be a little like more forgiving of myself, and also in part because I was reading about this, that if you're more forgiving of yourself, you tend to be more forgiving of others too. And that if you're like kind of hard on other people, it's probably because you're kind of hard on yourself. And that, like we could all use a little tenderness, these are challenging times, and like give it a rest and, do a little meditation breathing or something.
This is a great setup one. Please don't do please do a shameless plug. Don't be shy about it. So the next question is, do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Book recommendations. Okay. Yes. I just finished a book called Small Rain by Garth Greenwell. I think I got his name right. Small Rain. And it's fiction, but it is clearly very much based on the author's life. It's about his experience in a hospital. He's had some serious medical episode, and it's into his interior experience of that. And the author is so insightful, and just the way he captures the details of being in a hospital and what that's like with the nurses and the experience. It was really a really amazing, thoughtful book that I, highlighted passages like this is wonderful, and just so so rich and meaningful. So I strongly recommend that book.
I'm going to say it then if you won't. You also got to read Take Back the Game. Anyone who wants
Oh,
to hear more.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I really admire what you're doing, you guys, both of you. I think it's, I know that's not the intention of the question, but I do appreciate this conversation really very much. I've loved talking to both of you. And I especially appreciate having a dialogue about subjects where there's disagreement, because we need more of that, or we're not killing each other or hating each other. You know, we can disagree and still be civil. But as far as youth sports go, I guess I always want to emphasize that I'm a believer in sports. I think they're an important part of life. They can be, and to not be trying to condemn anyone for having their kids play sports, including you, Troy, with your 4-year-old ice hockey player. But that, just to pay attention to like the outside forces that have an influence that you may not be aware of, like the money, the industry, these sort of invisible forces that can get you away from doing what you actually might think is right in the long run.
Awesome. Linda, before we let everybody go, before we let people go on the podcast, the last thing we ask, and this is how we got introduced through Malcolm Gladwell, is we say, now that you've kind of talked to us, you know what the podcast is about, who are a couple people that you think we should have on that you know personally that we should have a discussion with?
Okay, so the first is a woman named Bobby Moran, and she is an athletic director at a large private school in Massachusetts. And if you really want to know what youth sports are like from the trenches, again, youth being high school, she would be fantastic. She's so thoughtful and smart. She's athletic. She's got 2 kids who played sports in college. She's got the whole perspective, and can some of the changes that have happened, especially with NIL and that sort of thing with athletes and how that's affecting high school kids. She would be great. I think you guys would have a wonderful conversation. Another is a woman named Lenore Skenazy, who is the author of Free Range Kids. And she just did a TED Talk yesterday or the day before, on the value of free play. And she is kind of the second half, you know, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, who's always talking about phones and how we got to get phones out of schools, which I totally agree with. He is just as much a believer in the kids need more opportunities for independent activities. And Lenore is a big part of that movement, to encourage parents to let their kids take reasonable risks, to let them explore and take chances, even though parents are terrified. She's a wonderful advocate of that, and she's funny, and she'd be a great guest. Both of them would be amazing.
Linda, thank you so much for joining us today. Your book was very eye-opening, and I think all sports parents need to consider your point. The intensity in youth sports is only going up, and maybe it's time we all take a breath. Thank you for your time, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. I sincerely had a great time talking to both of you, and commend what you're doing. And I also apologize for my technological deficiencies, because I inconvenienced you both, and I really appreciate having had the opportunity. I thank Malcolm for that too.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for joining us. It was good. And like you said, it's good to be able to talk and disagree
Yes,
and not.
absolutely.
I also think I'm going to make a philosophical point here before we close it. I also think that's what we need in the country. Like you and I started off, I'm like, oh, we totally disagree. And by the time we finished actually talking, we're actually like right next to each other, just kind of back to back.
Absolutely. I think that's true of so many things. It's just, you know, like we can have the same goal and yet just come at it from a slightly different point of view, but the goal is the same. I think that's true in politics too. It's just gotten so distorted and but good. It was really fun.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you.